Hello, amazing people. It is time for another hot lap. Buckle up, get your helmet, and let's go for a ride. This week, we're going to be diving into the worlds of Formula One, the World Endurance Championship, or WEC, and NASCAR to break down each of the races that were held over the week in each of the respective series. Formula One in China, the World Endurance Championship in Italy, and the NASCAR race that took place in the infamous Talladega. I hope everybody is doing well. I have 5 pages of notes from each of the races. Well, 5 pages total in notes. We got a lot to dive into. It's going to be a fun episode. Welcome back. Let's get right into it with some Formula One. Alright, as the first sprint weekend of the year, it is natural that excitement was high and expectations were minimal. Nobody knew or could expect the outcome that was seen. I think that this is all added to the excitement and buildup of the race itself. We have 2 qualifyings and 2 race sessions to talk about, so let's get right into it with the sprint race qualifying session. In sprint quali, we had Alex Albon with his Panda helmet that led us to a great driver view camera. The Panda, every time it come on, you couldn't help but smile. We saw some more custom helmets. I believe Zhou had a custom helmet that was like the topography of Shanghai. Maybe some others. Alex Albon definitely takes the cake for best helmet with that Panda design. Oscar Piastri reported light raindrops with a 60% chance of rain throughout the session on the official weather radar. Zhou's driver view camera shows how hectic the circuit is. We rode along with him from the driver's eye camera standpoint, where we're looking out at the car. It shows how fast that you go down the main straight, how much his head was moving back and forth through the corners, all the G's that are put onto them. It just made it very, very obvious, especially for the Shanghai circuit. That's the first time that we've had a driver's view around there, and it definitely stuck out as something that was quite incredible and impressive. Russell reports more rain and is in danger by the last lap of the first quali. Everybody started to lose traction a little bit at that point. Nothing too crazy ended up happening, except for Charles Leclerc reporting a fire in turn 5 that led to the delay at the end of the session as the fire marshals were recruited to extinguish it. At the end of the day, we have Sargent, Tsunoda, Albon, Gasly, and Ocon not making the cut at the end of the first qualifying session. Sprint qualifying session 2 was 10-minute delayed due to the fire, of course, that the marshals were doing a good job to put out. That was just a 10-minute session in itself. Obviously, with the sprint qualifying and the sprint race, the whole idea is to have a miniature version of the regular qualifying and regular race, so everything was a little bit shorter at this point. Dynamic weather was playing a large factor in the qualifying as we advanced through the sessions. It began to rain more and more, heavily, I guess. It began to saturate the track a little bit more, which made the first lap that drivers were doing at the start of SQ2 and SQ3 that much more important and impactful, as the track could continue to deteriorate. So getting a solid first lap, push lap down was very, very crucial to kind of set yourself up for success later on in case the track didn't develop, but instead got much, much slower. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri were looking very fast and showing a lot of problems as the first push laps put the Papaya McLarens ahead early, which, due to the weather, as I was saying before, is more crucial than on other opening laps from normal qualifying kind of moments, I guess, more other qualifying sessions. George Russell is knocked out at the end of Q2 as the rain started coming down and the track is deemed to the wet conditions by the stewards. Russell, accompanied by Hülkenberg, Magnussen, Ricciardo, and Stroll, were eliminated in SQ2. The rain thickened for the start of SQ3 and puts out the conundrum of what tire would be most beneficial, especially for early in the session, and it looked like Inters were going to be the tire of choice for the Q3 session for the entirety of the session. Leclerc goes off on his warm-up lap and is not able to and is able to not pick up too much damage from the wall, bumping kind of square on the nose. The grip seems to be scarce, and drivers desperately looked for it. Verstappen, one of those drivers, had to abort his first attempt at a hot lap. The drivers were sliding around the lap, having to be very mindful of their brake and throttle application. Norris ended up taking pole position, but getting his time deleted, which put Lewis Hamilton on pole. But then we hear that Norris' time was reinstated, and he was put above Lewis, and will start from pole in the sprint. The top 10 for the sprint race qualifying would be Norris, Hamilton, Alonso, Verstappen, Sainz, Perez, Leclerc, Piastri, Bottas, and Zhou. Hopping into the sprint race now. Sprint race, I have a couple of notes for, nothing too crazy. We have Lewis almost immediately jumping Lando Norris off the start. They went side by side through the long turn 1. Where eventually Norris ran wide before the setup for turn 2. This bumped him back into about P7 behind the two Ferraris after he went wide at the end of turn 1, moving pretty far backwards for Lando Norris. Unfortunately, not going to be his maiden victory in Formula 1. Another good race that unfortunately were blown because Lando decided to be a silly goose. Alonso and Hamilton were out front at this point, with Verstappen behind slightly. On lap 7, Verstappen moves around Alonso for P2. He then quickly works his way up and closes the gap to Hamilton, passing him on lap 9. Perez, Sainz, and Leclerc also get around Alonso, and Alonso goes into the box with a punctured tire. Leclerc then passed his teammate for 4th position. Your top 8 for the sprint race. Top 8, because that is everybody who got points in the sprint race, are Verstappen, Hamilton, Perez, Leclerc, Sainz, Norris, Piastri, and George Russell, picking up the last point. Moving into the race qualifying now. All right. Race quali is kind of where it gets a little bit important. It was actually just kind of a normal qualifying session. There was no rain, no nothing to worry about. The cars were just doing their qualifying hot laps, trying to set the best lap that they could. Sargent, Tsunoda, Hamilton, Magnussen, and Zhou are the first ones out of the session, unable to put a lap together. A major upset, obviously, for the 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton, who departed early with the other 4. Potential penalty for Nico Hülkenberg for overtaking in the pit lane due to a miscommunication with his team. Nico and his teammate Kevin Magnussen were pulling out of the box at the same time. Nico Hülkenberg was already out in the lane. Kevin Magnussen was asking if he could pull out in front of Nico, and Nico was told to... Am I getting that right? Nico Hülkenberg was told to overtake the cars in front of him if they were stopped in the pit lane from his team. This was a breach in the rules and obviously was not allowed, so it was a lot of confusion for Kevin Magnussen for where he needed to join. Ended up joining further back than he wanted to. Hülkenberg went around the 2 drivers who were stopped in front of him in pit lane, making that for a big miscommunication overall. I am not sure if he did get a penalty for that. I don't believe he did. I don't think that it was mentioned, but it was definitely something that Haas and everybody else were warned about. Sainz spun onto the gravel and bringing out the red flag for the session. That'd be Q2. He, however, saved the car, got it going again, and made it back to the box. He was able to stay in the session. Going out after the team fixed it, the red flag just allowed Ferrari to have a little bit more time to look at the car. Beneficial to all of them. Going out in Q2, we have Gasly, Albon, Ocon, Daniel Ricciardo, and Lance Stroll. We have a Red Bull 1-2 front row lockout after improvements from all drivers on their final hot laps. Not a lot of drama at the end of that session. Let's get into the race now that we have set ourselves up with the qualifying. All right, jumping into the race, and boy was it a good one. Alonso jumps around Sergio Perez off the start with a very bold getaway around the outside of turn 1, moving him up into P2. Lewis Hamilton went backwards from 18th to 19th off the start with some disappointment. Mercedes started him on the soft tire. It ended up not being beneficial as he's moved backwards off the start. He did work his way through the field a little bit. We'll get into that a little bit later on, but it was a very, very dead race from Lewis Hamilton. Sergio Perez gets back around Alonso later, putting him back into a third place battle with Lando Norris. On lap 7, Lando Norris overtakes Alonso for third place, moving him back into fourth. At this point, Verstappen and Perez were pretty spread out from the rest of the pack. Lando Norris was in third. Obviously, with Alonso, I believe Piastri and the Ferraris were somewhat close, but pretty far behind them. On lap 12, here we go. On lap 12, we have Charles Leclerc passing Piastri to move up into fifth place of the Grand Prix as the lead Ferrari. Gasly has pit stop issues right after Red Bull pump out a 2.1 and 2.0 second double stack. There was no reason for Red Bull to box both Verstappen and Perez on the same lap. Their drivers had enough of a gap between them that they were able to double stack with neither driver losing time and still pump out a 2.1 and a 2.0 second double stack pit stop. Insane from Red Bull, just proves that they are really operating on an elite level that is much, much different from everybody else on the field, probably. On lap 17, we have Ferrari moving to Plan D. This put them on a projection path to be on Plan W by lap 25. It could be Leclerc going for a one-stop this race. Lap 21 brought trouble for Battery Voltas as he brings out the yellow flag with engine issues. The VSC is called out due to the incident, but very, very late on. Everybody, including the commentary team, thought it was a fairly obvious call from the get-go that the VSC or safety car itself would need to get called out. The full safety car was brought out on lap 24, however, as the state car was stuck in gear. They could not put it in neutral to clear it off the track, so they had to brought out a crane. When it is brought out, the field gets jumbled around a little bit. Leclerc, obviously our big winner from not boxing earlier, takes his pit stop under the safety car conditions. Yuki Tsunoda spins shortly after the safety car restart, which brings it straight back out of the pit lane and sends Yuki Tsunoda out of the race. Not the only V-Carb leaving the race early. Daniel Ricciardo gets rear-ended by Lance Stroll, which was caused by a lockup further up the field. Drivers began slowing down. Lance Stroll was not paying attention to what was happening in front of him, looking at the apex of the corner already, rear-ending Daniel Ricciardo, then going further and blaming Daniel Ricciardo for brake checking him. On lap 32, the cars began again under normal racing conditions. Ricciardo and Tsunoda are both forced to retire with car damage at this point. Piastri dropped back quickly after getting a report of heavy damage on his car from the Ricciardo incident. This was on the backside because he was the driver in front of Daniel, and I do believe that Daniel might have just barely hit the back like a diffuser and knocked some carbon off. We all know on a Formula 1 car, though, that is very, very detrimental damage. The crowd oohs as Lando locks up through a corner. It was kind of a big moment on the TV because all the announcers stopped talking and were looking for something that had happened. Ended up just being Lando Norris having a little lockup. He is ahead of Perez and shooting for P2 to match his best result in F1 at this point. Norris in P2 was about 0.4 of a second quicker. Max Verstappen ended up winning the Grand Prix. Our top 10 are Verstappen, Norris, Perez, Leclerc, Sainz, Russell, Alonso, Piastri. Lewis Hamilton ended up picking up points with Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas behind him. So, good race recovery for Hamilton. Well done from Hülkenberg. Lando Norris capitalized on his opportunity. Perez is doing what he needs to do and picking up those last podium spots for Red Bull. Verstappen doing what he always does and wins the race. Overall, a very solid weekend in China. It brought a lot of fun. It brought a lot of mystery. I think that it was a very, very successful weekend that kind of helped revive the hopes in F1 at least a little bit. Moving into the World Endurance Championship next. Alright, moving into the World Endurance Championship, we are going to hop straight into the 6-hour race that took place around Imola. Ferrari lead out the race with a 1-2-3 in hypercar that they earned from qualifying. Contact straight off the corner and chaos into turn 1. This was right off the start of the race. We see both Alpines and a Peugeot are spun, as well as a BMW that gets sent off into the gravel trap and picks up a puncture. Also, while this is happening further back in the GT3 class as they come across the line, the Porsche got caught up and suffered some major front end damage, as well as the Iron Dames Lamborghini, and I believe there was one other car involved that I did not take notes down on. This brought out a full course caution and eventually a safety car straight after it went into the pit lane. BMW is wheeled into the garage, which means that it's going to get some bodywork fix damages, maybe even more, and same goes for the Alpine that was tangled up in that collision. Lamborghini takes the long way around a Porsche for a place further down in the grid. The McLaren in GT3 moves up to 6th place around a Mustang, making for one of the early overtakes in this race. The Iron Dames Lamborghini is in trouble with a possible puncture. Going slowly, we also hear that it is a possible gearbox issue. Robert Kubica, one of the Ferrari drivers, comes over the microphone, comes over to the team radio saying that the ALS is not working, which means that the engine is running colder than optimal. This is an issue, but a much better issue than if the engine were to be running hotter and overheating itself. So the car is able to continue, he just has to work a little bit extra hard to keep the temperatures up. Again, not a major issue. Mustang is dragging its diffuser and skid plate behind it. This was the GT3 car. It did at least a lap where it was just dragging all this carbon. It was like a big kite behind the car, basically. Couldn't have been good. They brought it into the pits and got it fixed. Hypercar is led by the 1, 2, 3 Ferraris. Still at this point in the race, the GT3 is led by the 92 Porsche, followed by the 46 and 31 BMWs. There's a full course yellow that's brought out for some carbon debris in turn 4. As the yellow is removed, the hypercars are able to continue working their way through the GT3 cars for the first time. Peugeot hypercar is going slowly with 5 hours 30 minutes left in the race, and on the radio immediately saying that he lost the gearbox. A manual reset of the electronics seemed to have gotten the car going normally again, but a big setback for the French manufacturer. The 54 Ferrari GT3 got beached in the gravel, bringing out the caution flags through Sector 1 that upgrades to a full course yellow a minute later. Looking back during the full course yellow, we see that the start of the race chaos is caused by the Azada that sends forward a pool shot effect that ripples out into the field. This was, of course, in the hypercar class for that incident that we talked about earlier. On the restart, the BMW is immediately put under pressure from the Toyota GR and both cars are looking much more competitive than they were compared to the race that we had earlier in the season, the first race in Qatar. The 59 McLaren GT3 has a right rear puncture that is likely from debris and brings trouble to the Papaya McLaren team. Ferrari swap track position in the pit stop sequence. This was for the hypercars, of course. Ferrari get around the Porsche Penske for the first true overtake of the day for position. This was for position 4 at this time, but obviously a provisional win. Peugeot uses an airbag for their pit stops as the air jacks on the car have failed. So normally how the hypercars work is they have little pistons that get shot down via compressed air that shoots these little pistons down and it jacks the car up. This was not working on the Peugeot, however, so they took like a little pillow and put it under the car and then inflated it with air and that jacked it up that way. We do see a mechanic having to stand on the front of the car though to help stabilize it from while they are being worked on. The Jota Porsche goes off, bringing out a yellow flag. The car is able to get off the gravel and get going in the race once again. However, the two Ferraris go head-to-head for the lead of the race. The Lamborghini and Porsche also catch the back of the Ferrari battle. Nick De Vries gets by the Ferrari for second place as weather begins to bring some excitement to the race. Nick De Vries, of course, racing for a Toyota GR manufacturer. Once the pits are done and the radar has been analyzed, the Ferraris lead again and end up making a very, very bold pit stop strategy that isn't believed to play out how they would like. It, in fact, did not play out how they would like. Team WRT, running the BMW M4 GT3 cars, are leading the race in the GT3 class, of course. As the race closes, drivers begin to go max push and excitement builds. The Ferrari strategy did not come to fruition. The Toyota number 7 leads from the number 6 and number 5 Porsche. The other Toyota is overtaken by the Ferrari on the last lap for 6th place. That is all I have for you. I can pull up a final result real quick. Right here we go, results. All right, for the race in Imola 2024, you have Toyota Racing, Porsche Penske Motorsport, Ferrari AF Course, Toyota Racing, BMW M Team WRT, Ferrari AF Course, Peugeot, and Cadillac, rounding out your top 10. Let's get into NASCAR now. All right, in the NASCAR series, of course, we have the iconic Talladega, home of the Talladega Nights. Not really, but it's a fantastic movie. If you haven't watched, I would recommend. The 34 leads the low row out of the gates as they jockey nicely and neatly out of the first couple of laps. Everybody just kind of stayed in their columns. They went around. By lap 7, Chastain, who started 32nd, is up in second place with Truex Jr. out in front of him. The 78 McLeod hits the wall and loses fuel pressure after some contact and is forced to box. Hamlin locks up and spins on his way into the pit lane. Unable to hold on to it, having to countersteer, he spins, taps the side of another car, spins him all the way around. He ends up facing forward and pulls right into the pit lane. Somewhat lucky for him, also very unlucky for him. Chase Elliott and Cindric chase each other to the line, and Cindric takes the win of Stage 1. Busch and Blaney lead out around early in Stage 2 of Talladega. Buescher takes a fantastic dive down the inside after a blocking attempt from Cindric early on that was aggressive to the outside lane, up high on the corner. Logano takes Stage 2 after a big push from Cindric, who ended up second place. Logano and Chastain are the two to battle off the line for Stage 3. Haley and Bell spin after a checkup from the midfield group of cars, knocking them loose, and they bottled up and spun again. The restart sees the field jumbled up as those who came in for fuel ended up further back than those who did not stop, leading the field. Bubba Wallace and Jones wreck each other on a turn as they both shot up into the outside wall. This caused half or more of the Toyotas to exit the race early. We had about 7 Toyotas in a single file line. This wreck caused about 3 or 4 of them to pick up some damage. Reddick and McDowell are 1-2 as the last lap, and only about a foot separates them. Keselowski pushes McDowell through to first and follows him through for second, but he launches his attack right before the finish line on the last lap. Then McDowell tries to aggressively block, but gets pit maneuvered into the wall, where Keselowski goes through but is slowed down majorly. This allows Tyler Reddick to come through on the line and take the win. Your top 10 for Talladega are Reddick, Keselowski, Gragson, Stenhouse Jr., Bowman, Alfredo, Byron, Gilliland, Hemrick, and Burton. Ladies and gentlemen, that was a lot of information. I tried to pack it into about 20 minutes. I do my best to keep these episodes short so you can move on, keep your attention span short, keep it going, listen to your music on the rest of your commute. I hope you guys enjoyed your time here. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, feel free to follow me on my socials. Those will be linked down below in the description. Come back next week as we go over race results, key moments, and all the other exciting stuff in the motorsport world. Until next time, don't forget to brake late and accelerate early.